Well, there's nothing better than taking a trip to your local cinema to take in the latest big screen horror film. There are times when the small screen has hosted some truly terrifying horror pictures over the decades. The term made for TV is one that may instantly scream low budget, low effort and low quality to some, but that doesn't always have to be the case, and that's what the focus is on here today. And for those wondering why Tommy Lee Wallace's 1990 It isn't featured here, that's because that was technically a two-part miniseries rather than an outright TV movie. So with that in mind, I'm Andrew from What Culture Horror, and here are 10 must-see made-for-TV horror movies. Number 10, Body Bags. Premiering in 1993, Body Bags is dripping with horror royalty. This three-story anthology was directed by the legendary John Carpenter and Tobe Hooper. Not to mention has fun cameos from Wes Craven and Sam Raimi, in addition to Carpenter and Hooper themselves having minor roles. In fact, John Carpenter's coroner is a particular delight in this film. As for those three stories, a young college student starts a job at a gas station on the night a serial killer is on the loose. Then we have a vain businessman who gets more than he bargained for when splashing the cash to combat his thinning hair. And then there's a baseball star whose world is turned upside down when he loses an eye. In terms of cast, there's a great ensemble here, including Mark Hamill, Stacy Keach, David Warner, Robert Carradine, David Norton, and Blondie's Debbie Harry. The less said about the performance of Twiggy here though, the better. Body Bags is a blast, bringing some great gore while also not taking itself all that seriously. Forget your chin-stroking elevated horror, for sometimes there's nothing better than seeing a gloriously campy, mustachioed Mark Hamill screaming in agony after having a cassette tape mishap. Number 9, The Norris Tapes. Airing on NBC in February 1973, The Norris Tapes was intended to launch a new TV series. Despite receiving positive reviews though, that series never came to be, with the Norris Tapes instead becoming a standalone TV movie. In terms of plot, the Norris Tapes centres on the eponymous David Norris, an author who's vanished and left various audio tapes behind detailing his investigation into the occult. That investigation, why, it involves a widow who claims to have been stalked by her dead husband. As the film progresses, we see Norris's publisher friend work their way through the tapes, unwinding this mystery at the core of the film. And by the time all is said and done, the Norris Tapes nicely sets up for further adventures. Just further adventures that sadly never came to be. Number 8, Hotline. Starring a post-Wonder Woman Linda Carter, 1982's Hotline focuses on a volunteer hotline operative tormented by a sinister figure known only as the Butcher. While clearly pulling a smidge from Black Christmas and When a Stranger Calls, this CBS production goes a little further by having Carter's Brienne not just targeted at a hotline gig, but also at home and beyond. Playing out in a classic whodunit fashion, Hotline was presented as quite the big deal when it premiered in October 1982, largely due to the star power of its lead actress. And for Linda Carter, this TV movie gave her a chance to shake the typecast shackles that so often followed her in the aftermath of Wonder Woman ending in 1979. The end result is a tense game of cat and mouse, with Carter on great form as far more than your standard damsel in distress that was so often seen in horror at that time. Number 7, Curse of the Blair Witch. While horror fans may have seen Book of Shadows' Blair Witch 2 and 2016's Blair Witch, something that often flies under the radar is the fascinating Curse of the Blair Witch. A TV movie that aired on the Sci-Fi Channel ahead of the Blair Witch Project's release back in 1999, Curse of the Blair Witch brilliantly fleshes out the missing trio of Heather, Josh and Michael, featuring mockumentary-style interviews with their friends, family, and college professor, and showing local news reports about their disappearance. We hear how Heather is driven, passionate, and a little bit pushy, how Josh is a slacker who's more interested in the glitz that can come with a career in Hollywood, and how Michael is a fairly regular guy who just likes a beer or two. Curse of the Blair Witch also makes mention of Ellie Kedward, the person who would become the Blair Witch, and details the local legend that surrounds that character. Of course, Curse of the Blair Witch was just one element of the Blair Witch Project's excellent PR push to make audiences believe that the events of the 1999 movie were indeed real. A PR push, of course, that did a great job on us naive, gullible horror fans back in the day who thought everything you read on the internet was obviously totally true, because why would people lie online? Number 6, Psycho 4: The Beginning. Alfred Hitchcock's iconic Psycho is one of those movies that didn't particularly ever need any sort sort of follow-up. But that 1960 picture, yep, it had 4 further films, a vanilla remake, but then there was of course the excellent, exceptional Bates Motel TV series. In fairness to those films, some of them are actually pretty decent, with the made-for-TV Psycho 4 The Beginning a surprisingly solid sequel and prequel. Here we pick things up with the once again rehabilitated Norman Bates, who's married and about to become a father for the first time. Concerned that his own mental struggles will be passed down to his child, Norman calls into a radio talk show where we see his early years detailed in flashbacks. Those glimpses into Norman's past show a young boy bullied, berated and beaten by his abusive mother and her equally abusive fiancé. And adding to the appeal for horror fans, Norma Bates is played by genre fave Olivia Hussey, young Norman is played by E.T. star and future Mike Flanagan regular Henry Thomas, and talk show host Fran Ambrose is played by the ever great CCH Pounder. Number 5. Ghostwatch. It's clear that 1992's Ghostwatch is a sham, a cheesy, elaborate 90-minute hoax. However, when it aired on Halloween night of 1992, this BBC production caused quite the uproar as viewers watched what was portrayed as the very real haunting of a mother and her 2 daughters in London, England. That was the Early family, and this investigation into the poltergeist known as Mr. Pipes was spearheaded by Michael Parkinson, Sarah Green and Mike Smith, 3 extremely respected, trustworthy British TV presenters. Rather than a live broadcast exploring the paranormal, an exploration that resulted in an explosive finale as Pipe takes over the TV studios and possesses Michael Parkinson, Ghostwatch was of course a mockumentary TV movie, filmed weeks before Halloween. To highlight that investment in Ghostwatch, 11 million viewers turned in to watch. The BBC had hundreds of thousands of complaints, and tragically one 18-year-old boy took their own life due partially to being influenced by what they'd seen in Ghostwatch. Number 4. Stalking Laura. Also known as I Can Make You Love Me, making Stalking Laura all the more terrifying is that it's based on some very real events. That true story is the one of Richard Farley, a serial killer whose obsession with a co-worker led to him murdering 7 colleagues. The acts of Farley were so horrific they ushered in the very first anti-stalking laws in the US back in 1990, with the creep finally surrendering himself to the authorities after a 5-hour standoff with a SWAT team at the Sunnyvale, California office of Electromagnetic Systems Laboratory. Here it's Brooke Shields as Laura Black, the target of this stalking, and Emmy Award-winning Walton's favourite Richard Thomas as Richard Farley, with Thomas putting in a particularly impressive turn. For the real-life Farley, he was sentenced to death after being found guilty of 7 counts of first-degree murder. At the time of this recording, he is currently on death row at the California healthcare facility. Number 3. The Baby's Room. Alex de la Iglesia's The Baby's Room, known as La Habitación del Niño in its native Spanish, was part of the Films to Keep You Awake collection of 6 TV movies back in 2007. In this, we have Juan and Sonia as new parents moving into a slightly creepy old house. As part of that creepy, Juan hears a stranger's voice coming from their young son's room via their baby monitor. And when that monitor is upgraded to a camera monitor, things become even more sinister as an eerie figure can be seen. The problem that Juan has though is that his wife doesn't see this, and his digging into this purported supernatural activity not only puts a strain on their marriage, but also puts their son in danger. Of course, the opening minutes show that Juan and Sonia's house has quite the murky history, and that history starts to come to the fore in the present day setting of the film. But don't be mistaken, The Baby's Room is far more than your run-of-the-mill haunted house picture. Number 2. Someone's Watching Me. Another John Carpenter mention here because, well, John Carpenter. One of the greatest directors in the history of horror, Carpenter's Someone's Watching Me is often considered the lost movie of the iconic horror master's career. Prior to Someone's Watching Me, Carpenter had directed Dark Star and Assault on Precinct 13, and he'd start work on his game-changing, genre-changing Halloween just 2 weeks after production wrapped on this TV movie. That said, Someone's Watching Me didn't actually air until November 1978 on NBC, 1 month after Halloween made its way to cinemas. At the centre of this picture, we have Lauren Hutton's Lee, a budding director who finds herself stalked after moving to Los Angeles, receiving anonymous phone calls, creepy letters, ominous gifts, and has her apartment broken into and bugged with hidden recording equipment. To add to the appeal for John Carpenter fans, Carpenter mainstays Charles Cyphers from Assault on Precinct 13, Halloween, Halloween 2, Elvis, The Fog, and Escape from New York, and Adrienne Barbeau from The Fog, Escape from New York, technically The Thing, and Carpenter's future first wife are also along here for the ride. Number 1. Ring. While many will be familiar with the Ring franchise due to the 1998 Japanese movie, the 2002 English language remake, or the various sequels to those films, the very first adaptation of Koji Suzuki's 1991 novel was actually a 1995 TV movie. For the most part, this is very much what you remember from the subsequent theatrical adaptations, with Sadako Yamamura and the cursed VHS tape at the centre of this tale. However, this TV movie is slightly different to those other films in how it is more faithful to Suzuki's novel, particularly where it pertains to Sadako. Airing on Fuji TV as simply Ring, the film received a home media release the following year under the title of Ring Kanzaban, which translates as Ring the Complete Edition. And while it's never received a physical release outside of Japan, the 95 Ring can be easily found online for curious horror fans to check out, if nothing else, just to see the differences from the 98 and 2002 films.